The National Cleaner Production Centre South Africa aims to empower industry through this instructional video series. We have looked at the cycle of the RCP assessment and implementation process in our previous 2 videos. Now we explore one of the most commonly used tools, the material balance. The material balance forms the heart of any assessment, starting at the pre-assessment phase and flowing into the detailed assessment. The material balance is a tool used to build a helicopter view of what is going on, a flow diagram that identifies and quantifies all input and output resource streams entering and leaving a facility or process. When fully developed, the material balance assists the user to identify and quantify economic and environmental weak points in the process, such as raw material, product losses, and hazardous waste generation. So how does a material balance work? First, let's understand why we want to do a material balance. In most instances, this is driven by some need to reduce costs, manage inventory quantities, or address quality issues such as toxic materials, legal compliance, and storage restrictions. Let's get started. As an example, we look at a simplification of a motor vehicle spray painting process. Step 1. Based on the need, define the parameters you want to better understand. For example, paint and solvent use, losses, and other process materials. Step 2. Determine the balance space boundary and scope. In our instance, the boundary has been set to include the preparation, spray painting, and drying chamber. Step 3. Define the balance period. This is the data set period or duration, in other words, a daily, monthly, or annual basis. For our case, we chose balance period over 1 year. Step 4. Define and record all the operating process steps within the selected balance space boundary. These include the pre-treatment, priming, painting, and drying processes using the following equipment: the steam generator, exhaust air filter, and the washing and cleaning of the spray gun and equipment. Step 5. Draft a detailed qualitative flow sheet of the process. Indicate the boundaries and represent the process steps with rectangles. Use arrows to show the material and energy inputs and the outputs of products, materials, and waste. Step 6. Balance and quantitative inputs and outputs for the whole system and the individual steps. Step 6 provides the user with an overview summary of all the streams entering and leaving the process and their quantities. Step 7 is data interpretation. It is here that the user will review and analyze the collected and plotted data to prompt the generation of improvement options for implementation. This process calls for insight and experience and can often include brainstorming or other creative problem-solving techniques to generate more complex solution offerings. During this stage, calculations may be undertaken to determine the overall process efficiency for comparison with national or international benchmark indicators. Aspects to consider during the option generation may include housekeeping issues such as leaks, material substitution, opportunities for internal recycling, recovery of waste, and current versus dated technology. On completion of a material balance, the user will have a process map of all the input and output material flows and their quantities. This then allows the user to assess where losses and excessive flows occur and to strategize around the implementation of an appropriate intervention program. Our next video in the series looks at how organizations can improve energy performance through the development of an efficient energy management system. The National Cleaner Production Centre South Africa is a program of the Department of Trade and Industry, hosted at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. For more information, visit www.ncpc.co.za.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this panel discussion on circular economy models. I have with me today two very exciting panelists, speakers to give us some more insight in how we can start adopting circular economy models and what does it mean for industry and specifically on product life cycle thinking and product life cycle management. My name is Leander Reiters. I am from the National Cleaner Production Center of South Africa, and I fulfill the role of Manager for Business Development, Strategy, and Innovation. And I have today with me two panelists that I would allow to introduce themselves. And I would like to firstly allow for our first panelist from the CSIR to introduce herself, and then to our next panelist.
Hi, Ali. Yes, I'm Linda Godfrey. I'm with the CSIR. I'm a principal scientist in waste and the circular economy and manager of the Department of Science and Innovation's 10-year waste research, development and innovation roadmap. And it's great to be part of the panel today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and Lee, thanks for having me today at the Manufacturing Indaba. My name is Zubaida Wavel. I've got 20 years experience in circular economy and sustainability as an independent consultant, and I'm currently the Executive Director of Center for African Resource Efficiency and Sustainability. And we are currently doing a program with United Nations on textiles value chain and circular economy, implementing eco-innovation and product environmental footprinting. Thank you.
Thank you for those introductions and welcome to the session. I am excited to have both of you, Linda and Zubaida, to have this discussion with me on circular economy models. We've seen over the years a growing uptake of circular economy policies and actions in the developing countries and especially in African countries. Linda, what is the circular economy landscape and uptake currently in South Africa like?
Thanks, Steve. It's not necessarily the easiest of questions to answer that one, in that, first of all, we've got to start with this issue around, what are we talking about when we're talking about the circular economy? Because I think that what we have in terms of the South African landscape is that we have fragments of the circular economy within our policy, and some of it has been embedded within our policy for many years, just never calling it the circular economy. And then I think also what we're seeing is sometimes this misinterpretation that the circular economy is about waste management and the circular economy is a synonym for recycling, and sort of we've seen more of that sort of emerging within some of our waste policy. So I think that, yes, you're right. We certainly are seeing this growing international, regional and local interest in the circular economy. And it's been driven by different reasons. In some parts of the world, it's being driven by resource scarcity. In other parts, it's being driven. I know that many of the South American countries, for example, they've actually built it into their NDCs where, it's being driven from more of a climate perspective, a climate mitigation perspective. And I think, one of the big unanswered questions for South Africa is, what is our driver for transitioning to a more circular economy? Is it resource scarcity? Is it creating a more globally competitive manufacturing sector? Is it about job creation and enterprise development? Or, maybe it's about all of those. So in terms of our policy landscape, certainly in the last, I would say, sort of 2-3 years, we've started to see it emerge more in our policy discourse. As far as I know, I think the first policy reference to this explicitly to the circular economy was the white paper on science, technology and innovation, which was published in 2019. And it really interpreted the circular economy within its broader sort of green economy context and the offerings that the circular economy could provide for South Africa. And then since then, we've seen it embedded as a core pillar of the third National Waste Management Strategy, 2020. and now also into the extended producer responsibility regulations as a potential policy instrument to help give effect to circular economy by helping to close the loop on certainly things like paper and packaging and e-waste and lighting. But I think that within the National Waste Management Strategy and the EPR regulations, they, just given the nature of the line department driving those, which is Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, it's been the sort of narrow waste interpretation, or at least that component. And then finally, I think, from the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition side, we're starting to see elements and sort of hints of the circular economy emerging in the different master plans, the sector master plans that are being developed. Perhaps not explicitly so, but certainly elements in terms of, product design and remanufacturing and things like that are creeping into those master plans. So definitely we're building a lot of the elements, but at present, South Africa does not have a broad circular economy policy. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. This is quite interesting. We, of course, also want to get a sense of, besides the policy context, and with that in mind, of course, how does this directly impact industry? What are the significant things that have happened or events that have happened over the past year or so that is important for industry to take note of when it comes to circular economy? And how does it impact industry, especially manufacturing? How does it impact industry to really make tangible and implementable use of the policy framework that is there and that is being created?
Just want to check, is that question directed to me?
Yes, that is directed to you, Linda. And
Right.
I would like Zubaida to also come in there after you.
Perfect, thank you. So I think, let me first start off by answering the question in that it's the private sector that's going to drive a circular economy transition in South Africa. While government can put the appropriate policy landscape in place and make sure that we have the right economic instruments and incentives and disincentives, etc., industry and the private sector are the driver of the circular economy. And so we really do need to be asking ourselves this critical question of what does the circular economy have to offer the South African private sector, and what does it have to offer the manufacturing sector? Because if it doesn't have something to offer these stakeholders, why on earth would they want to implement these things? So, we would need to be looking at, does transitioning elements to a more circular economy reduce costs for the manufacturing sector? And there a key element, for example, is around, they're the three pillars of the circular economy. There's designing out pollution and waste. There's keeping products and materials, closing the loop, keeping them in flow within the economy, and then there's regenerating natural systems. And certainly within the first one, in terms of designing out waste, that provides a lot of potential cost benefits and cost savings for the manufacturing sector. And we've seen this, for example, through the work that NCPCSA is doing around energy efficiency, water efficiency, materials efficiency. Can we get our manufacturing sector to decouple their growth and their development from resource consumption? Because with that comes a whole host of benefits. For them, cost savings, but it also helps to mitigate risk. We've seen the impact of energy insecurity in South Africa, and at the moment, we're in another period of load shedding in South Africa, and it has huge implications for business in terms of not having access to reliable energy sources. We've seen it in terms of water with the droughts in the Western and Eastern Cape. And we're seeing it in terms of, we're starting to see initial elements around materials insecurity. So, what happens in terms of the closing of the coal mines in Mpumalanga to the province? So as we start to run out of finite resources, it places huge risks on the South African economy. So there has to be a clear benefit, and I think that we need to do more to actually unpack and spell out for our manufacturing sector what those benefits are. I am excited that this is something that the CSR is looking at in more detail in terms of really what does the circular economy have to offer our manufacturing sector. But also, there are things that we need to start thinking around in terms of greater and improved product design for circularity. We're seeing a lot of the big brand owners internationally make commitments in terms of having their product, things like fully 100% reusable, recyclable, compostable by 2025 sort of commitments. So this whole issue around product design is critical. And that's where, the thing about the circular economy is it's a systems approach, and we need specialists all across the value chain. So how do we work with engineers around product design, materials use to make sure that products are dismantleable, easily dismantled and materials and resources circulated back into the economy. And then I think that also, from the manufacturing sector side, there's a lot that we can do in terms of leading the way in areas that are linked perhaps more to end-of-life products. So again, more on sort of the waste as secondary resource element, is to say, how do we actually take the expertise that we have in South Africa and create entire new industries? So we already have companies, for example, that are remanufacturing internal combustion engine and certain parts of vehicles. We as South Africa have a fairly slow transition to electric vehicles. We know that many developing countries around the world are going to be slow to transition to EVs. So maybe there's an opportunity for South Africa to position itself as a leader in remanufacturing, in refurbishment, in repair of certain things. And then I think also as we're starting to see the manufacturing sector and many brand owners really look at their products in terms of saying, is there an opportunity for me to move to an entirely new business model? So not one in terms of where I'm selling stuff. I'm not selling a product. I'm not selling something physical that casts a shadow, but can I provide a service? So we're seeing a lot of this product to service business models emerge, which I think is incredibly exciting for developing countries, because it means that we have consumers that can now access goods and services in a way that previously they could never perhaps afford to do so before. So, do I need to own a car? Do I need to own a washing machine, for example? Or could I still have access to the service through a lease agreement where then, there's regular maintenance, repair, products are updated, and as a result, we're designing products then in South Africa to last longer, as opposed to it's a case of how do we design something to last just long enough so that we have consumer confidence, but not that long that we can actually sell another one, which is very much kind of the business model of most companies. And I think that's what we need to move away from, because that's incredibly resource intensive. And we just know, we know the environmental and so the social and the economic impacts of all of this resource extraction and consumption. So, sorry, that was a very long answer to your simple question of what does the circular economy, mean for the manufacturing sector, but it means so many things. And I think that's what we need to start unpacking in more detail, and particularly understand it within the South African context, our developing country context, a relatively resource-rich country context, and not necessarily just try and plug and play models from elsewhere into the world, into the South African economy. Thank you.
It was so well said. I'm not sure what else to add. It's so comprehensive. And I think I'd just like to add, what does it mean for the manufacturing industry in terms of circular economy, is the fact that there is so many different types of concepts. And when circular economy came in a few years ago, it's also all encompassing. It's quite holistic. People are looking at it at the same approach as what they looked at sustainability, when it was the buzzword 20 years ago or something like that. And now this is the buzzword, but this buzzword actually has so many layers. It's sort of like an onion that you need to unpack and you need to unravel. And I think that is what we need to do, is to not redefine, the definitions are there, but to make sure that people understand that it actually has all of these different types of mechanisms and tools that is of huge benefit to organizations, to companies, to commercials, to our everyday life. And I think that is what the circular economy is about. And it's only beneficial for manufacturing industries and commercial industries as well. So going forward, it is then trying to make sure that these definitions, what actually falls under the circular economy, that these definitions are quite clear going forward for them, that they understand that some things they're already actually doing. They're doing recycling, they're doing, having boxes maybe that they are actually reusing internally or buying, recycled content for as raw materials. There's lots of things that they are actually doing that is already part of the circular economy. So it's not completely a whole different mindset change. There's small things that they are actually doing that's already adding value. And it's just making it broader and broader, and then looking at the entire value chain, not only looking at it from a site-wise perspective on your specific area. How do you now influence your suppliers? How do you influence your customers? How do you build partnerships to then look at broader systems of regeneration, at broader systems of remanufacture or eco-design? What does our customers require? So there's quite a lot to unpack there, and it's quite interesting, and it's a very exciting time to be, I think, in terms of the circular economy.
Maybe, Lee, if I can just add on to what Zubaida said, is that, this is such a critical issue, this issue around the definition of the circular economy. And I think that there's a lot more that we need to be doing to educate our stakeholders across all sectors of the South African economy in terms of, what are we actually talking about when we're talking about the circular economy. I mentioned earlier that, there's this misinterpretation sometimes that this is about waste management. And I think the thing that, we, at least as the CSR, try to stress is that this is really about sustainable resource management. This is about managing South Africa's future development risk within the context of our resource base, within our energy resource base, our water resource base, our materials resource base, so minerals and metals. We know, for example, that the water demand is expected to exceed supply. I think it's something like 17% by 2030. So what does that mean? Does that mean we get to 2030 and throw our arms up and say, okay, well, that's a cap on South Africa's future development? Or do we look at ways of actually decoupling economic development from water consumption? So this is really about sustainable resource management in its entirety. And I think in that sense, when manufacturing starts to think of it in that way, and as Zubaida has said, looking across our entire supply chains, our entire value chains, we've seen, for example, the disruption that COVID has had on long supply chains. So how do we manage these risks? And I think, if manufacturing companies can look at their supply chains, can look at their operations and actually ask themselves this question, how do we actually do this from a sustainable resource management perspective? How do we decouple our growth from resource consumption in order to manage risk and future development? I think it changes the entire paradigm in terms of, how businesses actually operate and how they think. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That is, I think that's really, I think that's a really good insight into what industry needs to be aware of, and what industry needs to really step the role that's also required of them to fulfill. My experience, and specifically within the NCPC, has been that with many companies, there's a big eagerness and openness to talk about resource management. However, the moment you start talking about product change or product, anything related to either changing their product, and Linda, you specifically spoke about design. You specifically spoke about looking at business models. And we know that in a lot of cases, businesses, especially manufacturing businesses, the product really is the cornerstone of the business model. Where do one start when you want to endeavor in going down the route of redesigning or reconceptualizing your product, and particularly when it comes to product life cycle? Where does one start as a business? And I would like to hear from Zubaida on this as well, particularly given her experience with life cycle assessments.
So I'll go jump in quickly. With regard to eco-design and actually looking at, and you very rightly said, Lee, that when it comes to actual products and changing a product, it is so difficult to change the company's mindset on, this has worked for them for so long. So what is the need for them to change? What is the need for them to then look at greener products or anything like that? And, the shift is there. They have to be able to move towards more sustainable products because of resource management. You might find that there's a certain chemical within a product that is no longer being used because it is highly hazardous or something like that. They're not even aware of it, and that would then affect how they actually have to look at redesign for their product. But shifting that, life cycle assessments and product environmental footprinting and life cycle thinking definitely couples and works very well with eco-design and trying to look at a new model for a company when it comes to product design. And something, for instance, the recent tool that we've been using for the last 4 or 5 years is Eco-Innovation, which is highly promoted through United Nations program. And the Eco-Innovation program looks at, what companies have been looking at in terms of strategy and what their current business models are in place, and then looking at new, greener business models for them. And this also includes looking at the eco-design and redesign of products itself. And life cycle analysis, for instance, an example that we've done was at a very popular beverage company. We looked at 2 different life cycle analysis, one for the actual glass usage of this packaging for this beverage and also the plastic. And then, the life cycle actually then tried to give specific information related to what is actually better for them to use. And the glass came out better in that situation based on the scope and boundaries of that specific beverage that they are using. So that's not always the case for everything. But that is how life cycle analysis can give you very, very detailed information based on modeling, statistical information on where are the actual environmental impacts, what you should focus on throughout the entire value chain of that specific product from cradle to grave, as they speak. So that is definitely, it works very well, life cycle analysis with eco-design, and it should work hand in hand. And going forward, we have tools such as Eco-Innovation, and we have product environmental footprinting that can also assist in looking at redesigning of products itself.
I think maybe if I can just add on to those excellent points that Zubaida's made, is that, up until now, this whole conversation around product redesign and design for the environment, design for circularity, etc., the only sort of lever that we've had up until now has been very much sort of around cost. So is there direct savings to the company? Otherwise, they're not interested very often in having that discussion. But I think we are starting to see other levers appear in the landscape at the moment. So, certainly we're seeing a lot more pressure from consumers and a lot more expectation from consumers in terms of greener products, etc. We're seeing, international potential constraints to South Africa's export markets. So talk around carbon border taxes and things like that, has significantly huge implications for South Africa's own manufacturing and our export markets. So how do we actually decarbonize our manufacturing sector? And then I think thirdly is that we're seeing some incredibly innovative small startups appear in the South African landscape, driven by youngsters who have this completely different paradigm in terms of how the world could work. And so I think, like any business, you either innovate and you redesign and you rethink, what you have to offer the world, or you become obsolete. And I think a lot of companies are at that cutting edge. A lot of companies do understand this changing landscape. They do understand the potential risks of resource insecurity to their own future. They do understand the pressures from consumers. And are doing things innovatively. And I think if they don't, many of them will be replaced by these incredibly innovative, emerging small companies. Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to add as well, interestingly enough, I sat in on a West Africa Business Connect program, which was a webinar which looks at matchmaking and the development of the textiles industry in the West African region. And one of the panelists was from the H&M Foundation, and they actually run this program which looks at innovation and change in specifically the textiles and garment manufacturing industries. And one of the key innovation areas, products that you mentioned was this jeans that they design the jeans perfectly suited for your body. And, it's a completely new innovative thing. And it's a startup company. And there were so many of these. And she says they get about 20,000 of these applicants a year. And, they give them 5 finalists. And these innovative things happen all the time. And it is amazing to then just sit on these platforms and listen in. And I'm like, I would be really wanting to have this jeans, this perfect jeans. But it's a new innovative thing. Another thing I could remember very slightly was the fact that they actually trace, we all say that they have recycled content in a specific fiber or yarn, but how much recycled content is actually there. So it's also like a tracing mechanism that they use. The details of that specifically, I'm not sure how it works, but it's a new innovative product that they actually utilize. So many exciting projects that's happening in terms of innovation. And as Linda says, if you are going to stay stagnant with your specific thing, there's so many new innovation and new young entrepreneurs that's coming up with so many good ideas moving forward, and you will be left behind in that specific industry sector.
Thank you very much, Zubaida and Linda. That is, I think, the point around SMEs and around innovation, disrupting the space and coming in as an aspect to further broaden the understanding and further the conversation around circular economy is another point that I want to reflect a bit further on. We've seen how SMEs have become important to the economy of South Africa. One of the things that we do realize is a point of, I think, further development is around incentivizing SMEs and especially the youth to take up opportunities and to really take up opportunities in the economy. What are some of the ideas, things, Zubaida, you've mentioned now, what you experienced in that webinar, but what are the type of avenues and what are the type of, I almost want to say incentives or channels that SMEs can take or can consider when they want to have these type of innovative ideas turned into businesses and fully fledged operations? Linda?
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, I think, this is one of these questions that sort of keeps me awake at night because, working so much with young students, postgraduate students, a lot of the work that we're doing around sort of training on the circular economy and around the waste management and is what happens to these youngsters when they graduate, when they leave school or when they leave university. And I think that, very often this thought sort of comes through my mind is that we're not actually creating entrepreneurs in South Africa, where our education system is designed to create people that are looking for jobs. And we know that that's not a sustainable approach. And certainly now post-COVID, within probably by now sort of in the high 30s or maybe 40% unemployment rate, is we just don't have an economy to sort of absorb in terms of formal jobs. We need to be creating entrepreneurs. And I think that, my sense is that almost every university program, if you're learning about chemical engineering, you should at the same time have a module around entrepreneurship so that we're stimulating these entrepreneurs so that they can think, when I leave university or when I leave school or whatever it is, or college, is how do I start my own company and do something really innovative? And in that sense, I don't think we have a safety net for entrepreneurs in South Africa. I've been fortunate to have worked with many young entrepreneurs around the world. And for them, they don't see the risk in it. They quite happily leave a formal job and start their own business doing incredibly innovative things. You spoke about the jeans ones, but I came across one in the EU that was, they were completely dismantling, denim, so sort of denim back to fiber and recreating brand new jeans, 100% circular. And it was a young entrepreneur, a young chap who had left a permanent job and had an engineering background and was doing this. And there was never a sense of risk of, if I fail, it then means I don't have a job. And it's this mindset change, because we have such a high unemployment rate. If I fail as an entrepreneur, then what? And so the question becomes, how do we create a safety net for our entrepreneurs in South Africa, that they can try, and if they fail, they try again until they succeed? And at the same time, this whole question around, is an entrepreneur born or created? I think it's probably a bit of both, but certainly there's a lot more that we can do to nurture entrepreneurs. How do we find those gems and really nurture them as entrepreneurs to unlock these new opportunities? And then I think the third thing is that there is just so much red tape, within our policy landscape, for various reasons. And sometimes, it makes sense that we have it there. But how do we streamline the processes? How do we make it easier for an entrepreneur to succeed? That they don't have to spend their life filling in paper and going from department to department, etc. The sad thing is we have an incredibly high failure rate of small businesses in South Africa for various reasons, and for startups. And I don't have the answer to this one. It's not my area of expertise around entrepreneurship and small business development, but I just feel like there's so much more that we need to be doing in this space, because the circular economy landscape is rich with opportunities. The sharing economy space is rich with opportunities. And it's about linking those opportunities to passionate youngsters who have this entrepreneurial spirit. I remember, I think it was about 3 years ago, I was asked the question by one of the youth organizations in South Africa, what does the circular economy have to offer youth? And my response was to say, well, think about every single thing that you use in a day, from the moment that you wake up until you go to bed. And is there a way that you can access that product in a completely different business model? And if there is an opportunity there. I mean, if you think about music, when was the last time you bought a CD, or do you stream it? When was the last time you bought a DVD, or do you watch it on your streaming service? These new services have kind of decoupled the service offering from resource consumption. You don't have to make a physical CD or DVD anymore. And it's the same kind of thing. Everything that I use in a day, the issue around the vehicle, do I really need to own a car? Certainly now with the pandemic, my car's been sitting in my garage for 99.9% of its time, while I've been working from home. But yet you're still having to have it serviced, and you're still paying it off, and you're still paying the insurance. So do I need a car, or do I need mobility? And it's the same kind of thing. What is it that the consumer actually wants? And by addressing that need of the consumer, I think it creates new business offerings for our youngsters and for our entrepreneurs. Thanks, Liam.
Yeah, it's quite entrepreneurship is so many things that needs to go into it to be able to have someone moving from, a business idea or just an idea to right up until, not just startup and entrepreneurship, but also full-scale commercialization. It takes quite a long time and quite a bit of determination. And in some ways, you could say, yes, an entrepreneur is born, but at the same time, it also comes, with partnerships, key partnerships, trying to assist them to get to that point. Just the whole mindset of failing forward when you have an idea and then it doesn't necessarily work out, but you're going to move forward, you're going to learn, and then you learn quickly and you move on very, very quickly. And then that's how, and especially when you are younger, you're more keen to then, have that, to take that big risks as well. So entrepreneurship in South Africa, it's a little bit still complex. And I think, it comes down to incentives again, financial incentives. And where do they actually go to then be able to build these partnerships? There's so many different, there's innovation hubs, there's maybe talk shops, there's discussions that's being held, there's workshops, there's some sort of training, but are they actually able to get from point A to point B with the proper financial incentives? What do they require? There's so many things that's happening. For instance, this awards Change Global Award that I was talking about, it gives 1 million euros to the actual finalists as well, for them to not splurge on new cars, but to then develop their business to a full-scale commercial business. And that is what we require. We require more of those incentives coming through. When it comes to entrepreneurship, where does everybody, you just go to one area, one business hub, one, not decentralized area, so that it can actually be fully developed. And like Linda said, it is completely, we do require entrepreneurship in South Africa because of the unemployment. Not everybody can go into the job market. You have to create, and circular economy and sustainability and greening economy. It has such a huge amount of opportunity available for everybody. And it's just to be able to grasp those opportunities. And, timing is also everything.
Thank you so much, Zubaida and Linda. I just in closing, I want to just quickly reflect on some of the key messages that I've gotten out of this discussion. I think when we started out, we reflected on, we really need to understand the context and the definition of circular economy within South Africa. When we talk about industry, it's important for industry to understand their role, and that role might challenge them. It might challenge the status quo in terms of business models, in terms of how they are currently perceiving themselves and their products within industry. Lastly, we also see that there's this massive opportunity for disruption in industry, for SMEs to come through, and for the youth to take these opportunities up, given the space that is created for them to actually be conducive to do that. With that being said, what's your final thoughts on how do we take this forward as South Africa? And please feel free to share any any projects or any activities that you might be part of or aware of that could assist or that could help in taking this forward. Linda?
Thanks, Lee. That was an excellent summary after all of my waffling, so thank you for that. I think that, first of all, I think there's a lot of work that we need to do really in terms of educating stakeholders around the circular economy opportunity, around domesticating the concept to South Africa and answering these key questions. What does the circular economy mean for us? What does the circular economy have to offer South Africa? My personal opinion is that we don't have a choice in transitioning to a circular economy. We just don't. The current linear take, make, dispose economic model is unsustainable. We know the climate impacts. We know the stress that it places on our water resources. We know the stress that it places on biodiversity. So transitioning to a circular economy provides us with an opportunity to address, I'm going to say, all of the big environmental challenges currently facing us. So the question then becomes, how does South Africa transition it? How do we sell this concept of the circular economy to our stakeholders? And it's going to require educating stakeholders in terms of what it means, educating stakeholders in terms of the opportunities that it provides and the benefit that it provides for all South Africans. And I think, this is a critical issue as well, is that if we're going to transition to a circular economy, it has to be part of that just transition discussion as well. Is that, we ask ourselves the question, is South Africa using its resources in the best interest of all South Africans? And, I think we could have a whole separate panel session just on answering that one, critical question. But, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And, I am excited around the work that the CSR is doing, just as one of the many parties that are currently involved in the circular economy discussion in South Africa. But what particularly I appreciate about the CSR's approach to the circular economy is it's taken very much the sectoral base. So what does the circular economy mean for mining? What does the circular economy mean in terms of regenerative and circular agriculture? What does it mean in terms of mobility, in terms of human settlements? How do we create more circular, livable cities and towns in South Africa? And certainly in terms of, the low-hanging opportunities, what does it mean in terms of more circular energy systems or more circular water systems? So with this paradigm change around, it's not about waste, it's about sustainable resource management, it then allows us to delve into every sector of the South African economy and start to identify real opportunities for this decoupling of growth from resource consumption. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, I think going forward, we have to break things down into bite-sized pieces, like I've mentioned before, but we need a systems approach, that's for sure. We need an organization to take the lead in terms of developing circular economy for different sectors, and then have that overarching system process approach and look at then how does it then define for each and every company or each and every component of that value chain, what is it, what definition is clear for them, and how do they understand that circular economy is going to impact them in a positive manner. So it's looking at the systems approach and having organizations to lead with that systems approach, making sure that we have circular economy action plans, so to speak. Either it has to be part of the industry sector master plans, or it can be something parallel to that. And then looking at it from a companies and industry perspective, what does that then now mean to the different companies? How can they actually impact in terms of, and then breaking it down in terms of, what can companies do in terms of water reuse and recycling? How can they actually implement those types of things to have a more circular look process in their company? What I wanted to also add is education. It is so critical from grassroots, from, we used to call sub A, and going back to sub A and literally educating these young kids how exciting circular economy is. It is simple, it is all around us, it is just for them, and then translating it into the education system, and then translating it into the tertiary education system. It is not a standalone thing. It is, as Linda's mentioned, so many exemplary examples, and you can think, but is this, if you listen to this and you think that is also circular economy, this is also circular economy, it is literally an integrative part of what we do on a daily basis. And that is what the understanding you need to get away with, and that is what everybody, as a consumer, as a person working, as a mother, as a wife, as just a civil society person, or as a person owning an organization or business, that is the responsibility of us to educate ourselves in terms of what is circular economy and the positive impacts it can have for us going forward. Thank you.
Lee, may I just have two last closing points, because Zubaida got me really excited about two things, if I may. And I think, the one is the elephant, the bite-sized pieces. And I think, in the communication, it's around stressing, sometimes people can be scared by this idea of, this is a whole new, now we're talking circular economy, a whole new buzzword. But I think Zubaida mentioned earlier, we've been doing so much of this stuff in South Africa already. So we shouldn't be scared by these opportunities. We're doing a lot of the stuff. It's about scaling. That's the question now. How do we actually scale these initiatives for impact in South Africa? And the second one was around education and the youth. And, I'm always astounded by this. When I lecture to my students, I always say to them, you'll be the first generation that will start to experience the end of resources. And what does that world look like? And they get it, and they're excited by wanting to solve these big problems. They're excited about different models. The youth aren't necessarily as locked into this whole, I need to buy the house and buy the car and settle down. And, they're a transient, mobile young generation who want to be able to up and find a job in another part of the world, or move around, and they don't necessarily want to be bogged down by owning stuff. And this mindset change and this excitement that we see in the youth, I really do think we need to harness that, because I think they're the generation that are going to help us really solve these big challenges that are facing society. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, both Linda and Zubaida. Thank you for your insights, and thank you for the work that you're doing in this space. The message that I'm hearing is that this is not happening somewhere out there. We need to bring this closer to home, and we need to run with it. And the moment we start realizing that it's not happening somewhere out there and by someone else, it's happening right here, and we need to take the ownership of it. That's the point where we need to get to really start understanding the roles that we play in broader society in driving this transition to a circular economy. Thank you once again for your time, and we hope to talk to you soon and to hear soon from what you are doing out there in advancing the circular economy in South Africa. Thank you.